Due to recent cases in Ferguson, Missouri and Baltimore, Maryland gaining national attention, there has been more emphasis on finding ways to promote accountability and transparency in interactions between police officers and civilians. Up next, we're going to talk to Paducah Police Chief Brandon Barnhill about body-worn cameras. Stay with us. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Your City at Work. I'm Public Information Officer Pam Spencer. Police departments across the nation are either researching or using body-worn cameras. It sounds simple. You put a camera on an officer and then you have an interaction, a record of the interaction of the officer and the civilian. But the issue is definitely not so simple. Joining me now to talk about body-worn cameras is Paducah Police Chief Brandon Barnhill. Thank you for joining me.
Good morning, Pam.
Good morning. Well, the first thing I want to talk about before we get into body-worn cameras, the national incidents that have gained a lot of attention, these were incidents that the question was use of force. Define use of force and define it for Paducah Police too.
Paducah Police Department's definition of use of force is anything that would be beyond the normal handcuffing of a suspect or offender. In 2014, we roughly had 2,600 or so arrests for the entire year. Percentage-wise, we only had approximately 1% of force, all use of force for the entire year that was anything above and beyond the normal handcuffing. So, specific to Paducah, our force that is often questioned or what the community would be concerned about is very, very minimal. But we also need to be transparent with the community. We realize transparency within our nation now is more critical than ever. And this is just another step to provide that transparency by allowing the officers to wear body cameras.
Now, if you do have a situation that does require more force than just normal handcuffing, what does the officer have to do when they get back to the department? What kind of forms?
The officers are required, depending on the level of force and what particular type of force, are required to document that. That form is called a response to resistance report, or it could be a taser report if a taser is applied in that situation. That response to resistance report identifies everything that happened within the particular incident, what the suspect said verbally, what his physical demeanor was, what his actions were prior to the incident, during the approach and use of force by the officer, and the follow-up care that was provided to that individual.
Now to the issue about body-worn cameras. The Paducah Board of Commissioners recently approved the purchase of body-worn cameras for the officers of the Paducah Police Department. Are you guys kind of ahead of some of the other departments? Are more and more departments doing this?
Well, I think you have to step backwards from that. You know, video within law enforcement has been around for many, many years, whether it be InCar cameras or whatever the use, and even the early stages of body-worn cameras. The national spotlight has put a larger focus on that. But we didn't feel like at our agency that we needed to jump in with both feet, not having some answers to be able to provide to the community and to the commission. It is a large financial commitment to the agency that is not supported by federal dollars for the most part. So the burden relies on our community to support our decision and to make sure that we're buying something that is of quality, that's going to produce a product that we can use versus just a blurred, image that really doesn't tell us anything. So we wanted to test a couple different vendors that were out there, find out what would be best used by our agency and what we could afford, and make sure that our officers have the proper equipment to move forward with that.
So you did go through a pilot testing before the purchase?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
What did you find in the pilot testing?
There's many, many vendors that are out there. We could have tested for probably a couple years if we wanted to test each product. We first went through and identified products that we felt were within our means financially to look at. We then began the review process of other agencies that have been down the road prior to us and looked at their reviews. That kind of honed us in on two particular products. The first was a VIEVU, VIEVU was the product name, and the second one is a product manufactured by Taser, which most commonly everybody is aware of with the electric control weapon. Taser's product seemed to be a little more viable for us. It is, as I mentioned, financially it's a big commitment, but what Taser allows for is they have a software product that's called evidence.com. Okay. That software product manages all the video files for us, and they are stored on a cloud-based system. With every other product that is out there, the obligation is back to the agency to provide server space, manage that server space, manage those files on that server by buying a software program that does that also. Taser has an all-in-one or a turnkey package. We like that about that. It was going to be easier administratively for us to manage on the back end. You know, when you collect all these files, somebody has to be there on the back end to manage and make sure that the dispositions are held. We're held accountable for that. We provide those files to the prosecuting attorneys, the defense attorneys, any open records requests, and those type requests. So in doing that, we felt like evidence.com or Taser had the best product for us.
Because this is something that you had to work with our own information technology department to figure out what is the best way to store the videos. Because video files, if you've ever dealt with a video file, they can be huge.
Correct.
And just the storage. So that was one of the benefits of why you chose this company. But I think a lot of folks, they just think, put a camera on, officer, record, download it, you're done.
Sure.
That was a lot of question.
Yeah, it's a simple principle, but it really is a complex issue and a large financial commitment, and you've got to have somebody to administer and maintain those files. And as you said, you know, connectivity is another issue. You've got to have a bandwidth large enough to collect all that and be able to distribute all that. So, yeah, several factors to consider.
I did find an article that had, it said 10 things to consider when buying these type cameras, and it was durability of the camera, reliability of the camera, how easy is it to use, the back-end data management like you were saying, the size, mounting options, price, customer support. Well, you think with, I mean, everybody's got technology and you have questions, you need customer support. But the one thing that I saw that was interesting, pre-event capture.
Yes. Explain
how that works.
That mirrors our current InCar camera system that we have. Essentially what that looks like is at the moment that the officer pushes the button to record. Okay. And that looks like several different ways that they can do that. But once they push that button, that recording system actually backs up 30 seconds. So a lot of times that's going to capture the pre-event type unfoldings. Okay. It's going to capture the actions of the offender or the community, what is said prior to the officer pushing the button. So that is, we've found in many, many instances that has been hugely valuable. Car collisions are a good example of that. Once the collision happens, the officer turns on the lights in the car. Once those lights are activated, that camera system's activated and it goes back 30 seconds. Oftentimes that is collecting data or video of the actual collision to corroborate what the officer's statement is and what actually happened. So
that's fascinating.
It's going to be a nice feature that the system allows for that.
So how's this process going to work? As an officer just comes to work every day, will they come to the station to pick up the camera, or?
Yeah, the system that we'll be purchasing will have what are called bank chargers. Okay. Those bank chargers are a download system also. So whenever they dock the particular camera, it will go through a download process and it will go through a battery charging process. So the officer will leave that at the station at the end of their shift, and prior to hitting the streets for the next following day, they will have to grab that camera up and put it on their uniform. That will allow for them to be able to ensure that, you know, they're not picking up one or it was left off a charger or it didn't download and the memory's full and those type things.
And that's one thing when you were giving a presentation to the Board of Commissioners, you said there will be times that an officer is responding to an incident as they're going to the station to get their camera and they're not going to have the camera with them.
Correct, yeah, there are going to be examples. You know, this is not a foolproof system. Right. We can't expect for cameras to be everywhere in our society and to capture every incident, nor can law enforcement be expected to capture every incident. But I think what the community also understands is that we will be capturing a lot more data. We will be capturing a lot of the incidents that are of you know, issue or concern for the community, and that way we will be able to provide transparency. So all in all, it's a win. I just don't want to set everyone up for failure, expecting that every particular incident in every second of every day of the officer's duty is going to be collected, because it won't be.
because you're developing policies, and you already, I guess this mimics the in-car camera policy of when the cameras would be turned on, because they're not going to be rolling for an officer's complete 8-hour shift.
Correct. Yeah, it will mirror our in-car camera policy, maybe with an exception or two here and there. But roughly what that policy states is that the officer is required, they do not have the option, to record certain instances. A lot of those are confrontational instances. Some of those follow traffic stop violations, and when we're asking a violator to conduct field sobriety testing, for an example. Emergency responses, our emergency response driving to capture a lot of that. Transporting prisoners, contacts with juveniles, vehicle searches or inventories, any act of hostility in the community that we can understand that we're walking into. Sometimes those situations are split-second transitions in which we can't predict what that offender is going to do or that civilian is going to do. But if we can predict it and we know that what we're walking into, then there are requirements for them to turn the recorder on.
So I guess let's go through the pros and cons of this whole issue. What each department is really looking at. What are the true benefits of having these type cameras? And it kind of relates to the in-car cameras. What have departments found as the great side of this?
Well, one of the biggest things in all of the reviews and all of the agencies that have been down this path before us, they have unequivocally said the video has supported what we already knew was happening. That our officers were being professional. They were holding people accountable. Sometimes that is not favorable, but they are doing that with professionalism. They are doing that with respect. And, overwhelmingly the video has been, when it's been produced to an individual that has concern with the agency or how a situation was handled, that's been surprising. So that was maybe an unintended consequence of the video camera system or the body-worn camera system, but it's been a positive one. So that's probably been the biggest surprise that many agencies are seeing.
And one thing that you had mentioned before, if an agency has some policies or actions that are flawed, this is not something that you want to use to fix them. This is for agencies to show that they are doing things like they should.
It is, and on occasion it's going to collect something that maybe we need to correct or maybe we need to improve upon. But you're right, if we have, as an agency, in which we don't, but if we had flawed policies, it would be deceiving, or it would be me heading the community down the wrong path for them to think that the body cameras are used to correct those failed policies and failed guidance. That's corrected through leadership and administration. That has to be fixed in any agency before a body camera process or implementation process starts. Because if that's not corrected, then it's really going to show that the agency's not functioning to the level they should be. Okay.
Now on the con side, some of the things that a lot of departments are maybe worried about, privacy issues and open records requests. Explain how that could be a concern.
I've alluded to a little bit the administrative burden that it places on the agency. Several agencies are seeing that they cannot maintain the level of request with the current staff that they had prior to implementing the body camera system. Right. They've had to hire more administrative personnel. That is a negative side of that. The amount of data that we have to store is huge over a period of time. The privacy concerns are a big concern of mine. Who has rights or who has access to the information? Currently, it's obviously going through the court system. A lot of these incidents are being tried, and we will get clear direction as the courts rule on many of these cases. But the fact of it being unclear right now, can the Joe citizen walk in the police department and say, I want a video or I want a copy of that just because I'm nosy, or just because I have an ulterior motive? So we have to be concerned about that in protection overall of the community. So we will have some restrictions put on ours. We will do what's right within the public records access or laws that we abide by currently. And if there's a question, we'll refer that to our attorneys and we'll get some guidance there.
And there are some cases going on across the nation that you're really closely watching because they will set a precedent on what's going to happen. What are some of the kind of issues that you might see coming out of some of these cases?
Part of that is the retention levels. For
how
one
long
thing.
you have to keep?
How long we have to keep the files. Obviously, we want to be able to purge those just as a normal setup in the system, be able to purge that because we're not having to store as much data, which obviously costs, by the size of the data that you're having to keep.
Right.
So purging is a big issue that we're watching out there. That's usually state law mandated, that you keep certain files or categories of files for certain periods of time. Some of them are kept indefinitely. So we want to kind of watch that, pay attention to that. Privacy issues, courts processes of how videos are used in the process to benefit the officer or benefit the process itself to give a better explanation of how the incident unfolded. Those are some of the things we're watching.
Well, internally, how do some of your officers feel about this? Because I was reading, basically back when in-car cameras started years and years ago, some of the officers felt, well, this is like Big Brother's watching me. I'm doing a good job. Why do I have to have a camera? Has it kind of transcended past that?
It has. I mean, that was the initial effect of, uh-oh, they're going to catch me doing something wrong. We have a philosophy within the Paducah Police Department that I challenge my supervisors to do, is go out and find someone doing something right. We often focus on the wrong because that's what we have to correct and that's what we have to address. But all too often we know that it's being done right, we never address it. So I challenge them to go out and say, what's that video? Go out and follow your officer. Show up on his scenes or her scenes, for an example. Find them doing something right and praise them for doing something right. The videos overwhelmingly have said, and what our training officer does in reviewing those, and more particularly the supervisors, our staff does an outstanding job, and we need to recognize them more and more for that.
Are you going to use some of these videos for training?
Absolutely. That's the benefit of capturing a video. If we can improve our processes, if we can make a situation safer for our officers by expanding their knowledge base, so to speak, or showing the video to them, that's a huge benefit to us. We have to look at it from that aspect also. All too often the community is looking to see how the incident unfolded and what the officer did wrong. We're going to use it internally as how can this officer better improve their safety, their interaction with the community, and use it in a positive manner.
Well, it sounds like it's a fascinating issue that is very complex.
It is.
But I think it's going to have some great benefits. Is there anything else that you want to share on just body-worn cameras or how the Paducah Police Department is going to be implementing? Or
the only thing I would add to it is the transparency part of it.
Right.
We are here, we are transparent to our community. We do not hide anything from the community. There are processes that we have to go through sometimes. There are delays in allowing people to watch videos from time to time. That does not mean that we have any ill motive. We're trying to hide anything. We have to follow the law. We have to follow the request and what our guidance is from our civil attorneys. But this overwhelmingly, I think, will prove to the community that they have an excellent staff at the Paducah Police Department, and I look forward to showing them, what good work is happening.
Well, thank you so much for explaining a lot of this to us today, and thank you for joining us, and thank you for all the great work that the Paducah Police Department does.
Thank you. We appreciate the support.
Well, I do want to point out that the Paducah Police Department creates an annual report. It is on the city's website, paducahky.gov, and I invite everyone to go there and take a look at the most recent report. It is more than 30 pages long. It has an article about body-worn cameras. There's also information about use of force, and there's information about these national cases making the news. It's a wealth of information, and it's compiled by the Paducah Police Department. Officers write these articles that are in here. They do the research. It's just a great resource. So I invite everybody to go to the city's website, paducahky.gov, and take a look at the annual report. Well, I want to once again thank Chief Barnhill for joining me today, and thank you so much for watching Your City at Work.